This is the wrong way. There we go. Okay, I think this is the right video now. Sorry guys, this is well, it's not the first time I've done this, but I don't do live videos very often. Let's see if it's live now. All right, that looks better. Nice. All right, I'm just gonna get started because I want to build this car in a timely manner. I don't really know how long it's gonna take because this is the first vintage Team Associated re-release that I've ever built brand new. So this is a pretty exciting build for me. So as you can see, it's the RC10T Classic Edition. And this is the version that was never, it was like the really early version that had the skinny front wheels. Even though I'm not going to use the skinny front wheels, I'm going to use just regular slicks for racing. I am going to build it up as a racing truck. And hopefully this build goes pretty smoothly. So I'm going to open the seals. Hey, how's it going? I'll show you the back of the box first because it has some cool vintage photos. And there it is. Got some plastic parts on the bottom. Got the body here. Wheels and those skinny front tires. Look at those. That's pretty cool. There's some plastic transmission parts. And these plastics look like they're a nice cream color. I know the 40th anniversary edition RC10 had real white plastics that, in my opinion, just don't look very nice on an RC10. But these look very nice. And I've got some original RC10 parts that I can compare the color to. Except for the bell cranks, which are that stark white color. And I'm not sure if the original one was that way as well. Some turnbuckles. Here's the chassis. And it's like a, it's got like a matte anodized finish to it actually, unlike any vintage RC10. It's got the RC10T etched into the inside of the chassis there, which is pretty cool. It's actually a very nice looking piece. The edges kind of have a little bit of a flare out there. which I don't know if I've ever seen on any other RC10 chassis. There's the shock parts. And the front suspension. Let's take a look at this instruction manual. It came with this nice sticker sheet as well. Look at that with a nice neon pink and yellow RC10T. Very cool. I'm already running out of space. I don't know how organized this is going to be. And there's the manual. It looks just like the original one, except this is like glossy paper instead of the matte finish paper of the old style one. So this is all the parts of the car, and I guess I'll show you some of the extra parts that I'm going to be installing on the car as well. I've got team associated bleeder shock caps that I'm going to install, or try to install. I'm going to see if they fit on the shock bodies. I've got a brass RC10T front kick-up plate, also from Moto-Obscura. I have a shorty lipo mount with a PureTech 2-inch battery strap. I'm going to be installing some green rear springs, rather. I have some ball bearings because this only comes with bushings. And I have a set of JC Concepts bell cranks because I hear the RC10T bell cranks, the long ones, do not make the car drive well at all. So I guess without further ado, let's get started. So it has us starting out first on the front suspension, so I'm going to locate that baggie and try to clear the rest of everything else off. Need a bigger table. Yeah, so like I was saying, this is the first team associated re-release that I've ever built, brand new. I've rebuilt some of the re-released Worlds cars from a few years ago, but this is my first fresh build. So there's another closer look at the plastics, and it's actually it's less of a cream color. The arms are less of a cream color and more of like an almond color, I would say. There's the bulkhead. It's a little bit lighter shade of plastic, and I'm sure this was all very very thought out, all of the different plastic colors. So here's a little baggie of hardware. It came with a bunch of silver E-clips. I'm going to use black E-clips just because I want to. So it has us starting out with the caster blocks. And the long ball studs. Let's see. The orientation of caster blocks is always tricky. There's the left one. And I'm not going to try to speed run through this. I'm just going to kind of casually go along, and however long it takes, it takes. Ball cup threaded in there. It says to use one of these thin pattern nuts, but instead I'm going to use an aluminum lock nut. I've got these gold aluminum lock nuts that I think are going to look really nice with the whole black and gold theme with this car. Let's do the right side. And I think already I might have found a mistake. Let's see, I think I'm missing a, nope, never mind. I just couldn't find it. One of the longer ball studs. How's it going, Tony? Check that out. It's time to install some axles. Grab some of my black E-clips because they are superior to the silver ones in every way. So like I mentioned before, I'm not gonna build this car to sit on the shelf. I'm gonna race it at all the vintage races, just like any other old RC10. I don't really keep any shelf queen builds. They always end up getting run at one point or another. Oops. There's one. Those gold lock nuts, that looks so good. And it also gets a set screw in the back of the axle to lock that kingpin in place. Next, I'm going to put a drop of Loctite on that. I'm not sure if it calls for it or not, but better safe than sorry. Just a drop of Loctite on there. Oh, that's not the right one. There we go. And the set screw. All right. Got the 2 caster blocks and steering hubs built. Now it's time for some arms. So let me see. I've got an original team car arm here, so we can compare some plastic color a little bit. Granted, the team car arm is 30-some years old, so it's a little bit yellow versus the more grayish almond color of the new 10T arm. I think it looks pretty good though. One. Jason, were those 30-degree caster blocks an option part that didn't come with the World's re-release? Because I don't know if I've ever seen those caster blocks. And again, here's that front bulkhead. It's a little bit lighter shade of white than even the arms. And the kit comes with this aluminum front hinge pin brace. Moto-Obscura sells replacement aluminum, stainless steel, and titanium front hinge pin braces for the RC10T as well. But I'm gonna just stick with the kit brace for now. 40 by 1/2. Try to organize my screws a little bit here. Shock tower looks nice. It's a very translucent G10 material. Oh, I see. That's interesting. That the 30-degree caster blocks came in the World's Car re-release kit, but they were a different plastic. I was kind of surprised when I first opened this box, and there were so many different shades of plastic here. But I think it kind of had to be intentional, right? I'm not sure if I've ever... I know I owned an original RC10T at one point, but I guess I never really noticed if the plastics were different colors. Maybe as they age, it becomes harder to tell as well. So it says the ball studs on the shock tower, and again, I'm going to use the gold aluminum lock nut instead of the thin pattern nuts. Just because I've had ball studs come loose in a race, and I don't like it when that happens. Okay. Actually, that nut's a little bit scratched up. I'm going to pick a different one. So yeah, that's my first tech tip for building these re-release kits, is don't be afraid to use different hardware than what comes with the kit. Because in a racing application, these thin pattern nuts, they loosen up and then the ball studs get all wobbly in the shock towers or in the rear bulkhead, and worst case scenario, it pulls out during a race and you're done. But even if they don't come out, it's gonna make your wheel wobble pretty bad before they fall out. So now we've got 440 by 3/4 screws for the upper shock mount. And the book says the upper outer hole on the shock tower, so that's what I'm going to do. Plus an aluminum washer. And I will use a thin pattern nut. Or actually it has me using one of these bigger nuts. Yeah. Just like that. Yeah, some of them do look like a glow-in-the-dark color. And actually, some of the earlier associated re-release kits, some of the plastics were pretty bad, pretty green-colored. Which I understand. Plastics is a difficult. It's difficult to color match these parts with some of the older parts in some cars that you would find, because it all depends on how much time the old cars have spent out in the sun, is how yellow they become, or really what shade of white they become over all those years. So for Team Associated to come out and try to either to match what the parts would have looked like originally, or maybe even if they're coming out with spare parts, they might want to try to color match them to parts that are already out there in the field. which I'm not sure if that's what they do, but regardless, decisions have to be made. There's the shock tower. Now it's time to attach the arms to the front bulkhead. So I'm going to slot the hinge pin brace in there. Let's see if I can slide a hinge pin all the way through. And just like that. Put some E-clips on there. And again, this came with silver E-clips, but I don't like the look of silver E-clips at all. You can use them, I just don't like them. I like the look of the black E-clips, which is a minor detail, but there's a lot of them, so you notice. Okay, here's the assembly so far. And now it has us attaching it right to the front kick-up plate. Okay, so that's interesting. It comes with, well, these are aluminum screws, but they're black. They're not the familiar gold chassis screws that we know and love with RC10 kits. But I think these are still aluminum, so I would be careful with threading them, or try not to strip them out. Let's see if I have a magnet. Oh, it's steel. So that's interesting. The front kick-ups, well, I guess all of the chassis screws might be steel. Which I'm not sure. Maybe somebody in the chat can let me know if the old RC10T came with the gold aluminum chassis screws or if they were steel as well. I want to say they were probably aluminum. And it does have a hex head, by the way, not a Phillips head. And it does feel like it's a little bit bigger than 3/32 inch, but this is the largest. Well, actually, let me try a 2.5 millimeter. Ooh, interesting. 2.5 millimeter driver slots into the head of these chassis screws very well. So if you've got one, that's a better choice than the 3/32 driver. Yeah, aluminum Phillips screws for the original one. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen, well, even the old re-releases came with those greenish aluminum chassis screws. But hey, steel's not bad for these. But these cars are always underweight anyways, so the steel bottom chassis screws will, at least it'll lower the center of gravity. So. Okay, now it has us attaching the chassis to the front kick-up. And so it's got the 2 different wheelbase settings. I'm going to do the long wheelbase, because that's what the kit says to do. Actually, I'm going to Loctite this screw, now that I think about it, because I've had this the center chassis screw come out on other RC10s. That. Oh. It also comes with a holographic sticker in there. That's pretty cool. So next step is to make the bell crank turnbuckle. Why is it so uneven? Look at this picture. Look at how uneven the turnbuckles are on there. You gotta screw the ball cup on equally on both sides, or else it's not gonna work right. I guess that's the next bag. Where is it? It's steering parts. Transmission. Shock absorbers. Where's the ball cups? Bag B. Bag A. Bag D. G. H. Bag manual bag. There we go. That's what the turnbuckles. So this comes with steel turnbuckles, and they're all black oxide coating on these steel turnbuckles. They look pretty nice. These are pretty heavy duty too. They're thick, as compared to a lot of the old low C turnbuckles were super thin and they were always bending. But these are probably not going to be a problem. Let's see this little one, and I'm going to try to thread on the ball cups evenly on both sides. The color of the ball cup plastics is pretty nice. It's just white. It doesn't have any sort of green tint to it, which is nice. I think that was another problem with the older re-release kits. Grab a turnbuckle wrench. Great. Let's see if these old, all right, let's see if the ball cups fit in this old ball cup wrench. It'd be really nice if it does. It looks like it does. Check that out. Now that's vintage. I don't know if they make anything like that anymore. That looks pretty even. And that is supposed to be 0.51 inches. Just like that, and that's supposed to be measured between the ball cups, so I still got a little bit of ways to go. Pretty close, so I'm going to call that good enough. So now it has me building the bell cranks that come with the kit, but I think I'm going to end up using these J Concepts bell cranks instead. They're the shorter ones for the buggies, which I hear makes the truck handle much better. So I'm going to move forward with that, but there are some parts from here that I need, I think. So I think I need another set of screws. So I'm going to use an original set, brand new gold aluminum screws for the steering bell cranks. A new teaser from Associated. I saw they were teasing parts, I think. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you too. Welcome to my garage. Oh man. Jason is hinting that Team Associated is teasing something way out of left field that I'm gonna have to check out as soon as I'm done with this live stream, so I guess I'd better get building. Okay, that's gonna look pretty good with those gold screws, I think. Now these J-Concepts turnbuckles are a little bit tricky because I found that you need to put the post through the flanged bearings, and then you got to put this spacer on the post as well. But then in order to assemble it, you need to kind of hold it upside down so that the spacer doesn't come off of the post. And maybe I'm just doing this incorrectly, but this is the only way that I've found that you can really kind of do this. Once you get it threaded on there, take your 11/32 driver and send it up the rest of the way. And I messed that up completely. Man, I'm gonna scratch this thing up even before I finish it. Okay, let's try that again. Actually, I think I'm gonna need another spacer, so I'm gonna open up this and see if I can scavenge some parts. And Jason, now the suspense is killing me. I don't know if I can finish this entire build thinking about what else is on the horizon. You know what? I'm gonna use the 10T turnbuckles that come with it for now, because I'm gonna have to come up with some other spacers and get some shorter ball studs to get the J-Concepts steering rack to work. And I gotta get this build done so that I could see what else Team Associated is teasing. And I'm going to steal the flanged bearings from, oh no, I guess I don't need to. Hey, build's going good so far. The parts look really good. I'm really impressed with the color and the build quality so far. I think it's definitely a step up, especially from the pictures that I've seen from the 40th anniversary RC10. I wasn't super impressed with the way the plastics on that looked, but the plastics on this seems to look much better. All right, I gotta stop paying attention to the chat, or else this is never gonna get done. Okay, there's a servo saver built into that. That's cool. Let's see. And again, on the ball studs, I'm going to use these gold aluminum lock nuts on the back of them, just because it's happened too many times where halfway through a race my ball stud will pull out or something, or get loosened up. So now I just do it to all of them. Okay. There's a little plastic top hat that fits in there, as well as, let's see, there's another plastic bushing. Where did it go? Uh-oh. There it is. It's white, so it blends right into the table. Little plastic bushing that fits on the bottom there. So I'm going to take these gold screws back out. Rotate this around. So what builds are you guys working on? And are y'all planning on getting one of these RC10T re-release? Oh, your mom, yeah, very funny. Hey, Oscar. Yeah, that's not great. I don't like how the, you know what, it's because of my freaking lock nuts on the bottom. It's rubbing on the chassis. So I guess it's not going to get any nuts. Yeah, it doesn't scrape now. That's unfortunate. This is a new version of an old frame. So this kit originally came out in '91, I believe, is when the RC10T originally came out. And they just kind of re-released it. So it's all new plastics, and because the people that race these, you know, over time the plastics get brittle or they start breaking a little bit, or cracking, or getting distorted, or all sorts of stuff happens to this old plastic. So it's really nice that they are re-releasing some of these kits, because it means that we get to enjoy these cars with new modern plastic that is hopefully much more durable. Loctite. Yes, I'm using Loctite in a few places. Loctite doesn't work on plastic though, unfortunately. I guess you could use CA, but I'm not going to. I'm not sure if you were referring to something specific. I was just putting the ball studs in the plastic bell cranks. All right, so that's what it looks like so far. And a 540 lock nut on top of each one of these posts. What color Loctite? I'm using Loctite blue for all of the metal screws into metal parts. It's technically Loctite 242, which is just I think it's just the general purpose hardware store removable Loctite. Yeah, Loctite doesn't really work on plastic. It only works on metal. At least in my experience, it does. Loctite has a lot of different products. They might have a version that does work with plastic, but I'm not aware of it. Yeah, so this is interesting. There's still quite a bit of play in the servo saver posts. On the I guess I'll call this the idler belt crank, there's no play because you can tighten it all the way down, but there's still some play on this one because the threads just stop, and the manual doesn't show any washers or anything, but I noticed that I do have an extra aluminum washer here, so I'm wondering if maybe I should just put that on there. I'm gonna do it, and if I end up needing another washer down the road, then I guess I'll just find another one. So either that's a manual issue, and they did include this washer for this specific use, or maybe not. But I think this will solve the problem. That's much better. So I just put an extra washer underneath this lock nut, and that's much better. Okay, we'll see if I need that washer later down the road, but for now I'm going to move on. Okay, so for the camber links, I need 2 more turnbuckles. Are these all the same length? Looks like all of the turnbuckles are the same length, so that's nice. Should make things a little bit easier. I'm just gonna get these started on here. Tighten them down a little bit. And I'm going to need my holder. And so the distance from ball cup to ball cup on this is supposed to be 1.95 inches. I don't know about you guys, but doing turnbuckles is one of my least favorite things in the world when it comes to building RC kits. Okay, 1.95 inches. And by the way, these turnbuckles are 2.65 inches long. That's 67.25 millimeters if you're looking for getting replacement turnbuckles, maybe titanium. All right, 2.25, so we got a little ways to go. And I don't know how good the audio is, but I did just break both of my wrists about 2 months ago. So you might be able to hear my wrists cracking as I as I do this. I'm just gonna get these close for now because they're actually kind of easy to further adjust once they're already on the car. So I'm just gonna get them to be in roughly the right ballpark. Oops. 1.97, so that's basically perfect. Oops. No, if it was the plastic cracking, that'd be even worse than my wrists cracking, because plastic doesn't heal. So now I know I need to screw this one basically all the way down. Just like that. .98, that's close enough. Okay, and I always arrange my turnbuckles so that they tighten when I pull the wrench towards the back of the car. So I'm going to put this one on this side right here. And I always have to double check because I always second guess myself when it comes to which direction that you turn it. There's one camber link. And there's two camber links. Another way to do it is that the turnbuckles typically have a notch and it's going to be facing to the left of the car. If you were sitting in the driver's seat, the notch will be on the left there. So there's the camber links. Now it wants me to do the steering links. And those are 2.1 inch long between the ball cups. So just a little bit longer than the camber links. I really like this this turnbuckle wrench. It's a TLR turnbuckle wrench, and it has a bunch of different size openings that you can use for various size turnbuckles. None of them are exactly the right size for these vintage turnbuckles, but it's close enough that it works. And I actually won it in a raffle at the last vintage race I was at the track in Maryland, Mimi's. 2.02, which is basically perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and snap that on. last one for the front. Yeah. Yeah, they're surprisingly tough. I have broken turnbuckles before while putting them together. That's no fun. They were always kind of crappy looking turnbuckles, like those old Team Losi turnbuckles with a really thin. It's basically a piece of wire that you thread the ball stud onto. Those are garbage. And on my double XT, basically every time I bring it in from a race, from a run, I have to straighten the camber links back out. All right, so there's the front suspension there, the steering, the bell cranks. That's looking pretty good. Now we are moving on to the nose tubes. They are black anodized aluminum, just like the original ones. Let's see. I guess I should do it like this so that you can actually see what I'm doing. There's a hole in each side. There's a bigger distance on this side and a smaller distance on this side. The smaller distance goes forward, I believe. Let me try the other way, just to see what it looks like. Yeah, no, definitely the smaller, the closer end where the hole is closer to the end there, definitely goes forward. With that in place, I'm going to need a 440 by 1.5 for the front. And for the other side here, these screws are really kind of too long for this application. You could get away with probably a 3/8 inch long screw for the front of these nose tubes. Because they end up sticking out quite a bit. You could actually put a lock nut on the inside there if you wanted to, but this isn't a really critical spot. Actually, there's not a lot of space between the nose tube and the steering bit, or the knurled knob for the servo saver. So I guess we'll see if it rubs in a second. Yeah, it's kind of rubbing a little bit there. I wonder if you could just bend the edge of the chassis out a little bit. But that's not ideal. Well, it'll be fine for now, since I'm going to be changing the bell cranks anyways, I think. That's just something to watch out for a little bit, is it's going to bind up on the knob, the adjustment knob for the servo saver. Right there. It still moves, but you can tell it's rubbing on the nose tube there. Not the end of the world though. Okay, now it has me opening bag D for the front body mount. So that's this contraption. With these two posts. And I'm going to need the 2¼ inch long button head screws that hold the post to the front body mount. Just like that. And that attaches to the front of this bulkhead using two 3/8 inch long socket head screws. Yeah, Oscar, I was just saying how the plastics on this car look pretty good, but there have been some re-release cars in the past where the plastic looks more kind of light greenish or even like mint colored than this cream nylon color. So yeah, it definitely looks like it could glow in the dark, especially this G4 fiberglass shock tower. Definitely has a little bit of a green tint to it. Okay, so now it has me installing the front bumper, which is where we're going to install the first Moto-Obscura part, or attempt to. We'll see if it fits. So the front bumper looks like this, and it attaches to the kick-up right there. You know, I'm not sure if it's going to fit because of the hinge pin brace there. No, it's a little bit too long. See, this mount was actually intended for the what's old is new style builds, where you have the RPM worlds conversion front end on the car, and those I don't think use the hinge pin brace. So we're just gonna install the bumper without the weight plate for now. But instead of these just flat nuts, again, I am going to use lock nuts. Let's see. And for this, it's going to be a little bit tricky to get in there, but I might need to use pliers to tighten down the lock nut. Hello! How are you guys doing? There we go, that looks pretty good with the gold aluminum lock nuts. Again, I'm using those throughout this build as a general replacement for the thin pattern nuts that come with the kit. These guys, just because, you know, on the ball cups and on the ball studs and stuff, I just don't want them to loosen up or back off. And you can use Loctite, but I just generally prefer using nylon lock nuts for most applications. And this is going to be a runner build, so I kind of want it to be as reliable as possible. So I've got the bumper installed there. That looks pretty good. Now it's going to have me put together the servo turnbuckle. This is the turnbuckle that goes between the servo and the bell cranks. And it is the middle size turnbuckle length. So this kit comes with 6 identical long turnbuckles, and that's used for the steering links and all 4 camber links. It comes with a really short one, and that's going to be that little link in between the bell cranks there. And there's one medium-sized one, and that's going to be what links up the servo to the bell crank. So this one medium one is going to come out to be 1.18 inches between the inside edges of the ball cups. So let's measure that. We are at 1.14, so a little bit short, but I'm gonna call it good enough for now. So I'll just clip that right on there. So now it has us installing the servo, and it's attaching it to those 2 servo mount blocks, which, let me see if I can find them. They look like that. I've got an original one here, so I kind of just wanted to compare real quick what they look like. I'm not going to install the servo right now, though, because I haven't really decided what servo I want to use. So there's a quick comparison between the old one and the new one. You can see the old one is a little bit more yellowish, but honestly the color looks very good on the new one. I'm very happy with that. And it comes with the holes pre-drilled, which is very nice. I don't think having to drill holes in your brand new kit is something that most people would want to deal with nowadays. So it's good that it comes pre-drilled. So they are just installing the servo there. Now it's time to install the battery cup. And I'm going to be using this Moto-Obscura Shorty LiPo mount. And I'm going to mount it sideways and all the way forward, just like that. And I've got a 2-inch ProTech or a PureTech strap, purple of course, and that fits perfectly on there. So I need, where's my screws at? Oh, right here. Just use this 4 3/8-inch flathead screws, 440. One in each corner. I'm going to do actually one hole back because not all of the holes in the chassis are countersunk, and I don't really feel like countersinking any of the holes right now. So I'm just going to use that hole and these 3 right there, because those are already countersunk. The forward 2 holes, one of them's countersunk, the other one's not. And I believe they did that because you would put like the antenna mount on one of those holes. And if it sounds like there's rain falling, it's because my neighbor has their sprinkler set up, and every time it oscillates over, it hits my garage door. So that's what that fun noise is. In reality, it's not raining here. It is very hot and humid, and even more so in the garage. So hopefully I'm not sweating too much. Okay, there's the battery holder installed there. Real easy to swap shorty packs in. Alright, now it's time to tackle the rear suspension. Actually, the antenna mount is somewhere around here. I'll install that real quick. So like I said, I'm going to use this extra countersunk hole to install the antenna mount. Just like that. Okay, let's move on to the rear suspension. So let's see, bag G. It's right here. Comes with a lot of rear pivot blocks. Are these different toe angles, it looks like. That's pretty cool. There's the rear arms, which of course don't really match the front arms, but they don't really match any of the other plastics either, so that's fine. Rear shock tower. Here's the rear bulkhead. Just like that. And just like all the other re-release bulkheads, it has the bottom cut out, and it allows the fitment of, you know, the more square lithium polymer battery packs. And the rear hub carriers, which they're stepped on the inside, so you don't need to use flanged bearings. So I cleaned up some bearings, and I'm going to use those instead of the bushings that the car comes with. And those are just 1/4 inch by 3/8 inch bearings. Actually, I don't know if I have 1/4 inch bearings. I have to look in my stash. I might only have 1/4 inch flanged bearings, which will be an interesting test to see if they fit these hub carriers. It might make the width too big. Yeah, that's not going to work. You need unflanged 1/4 inch by 3/8 bearings. So I guess I'm just going to use the bushings for now. Just because we got to get this thing built. So I can figure out what Team Associated is teasing. Bronze bushings. Oh, I don't like that, but it's gonna have to do for now. That's a 1/4 inch axle shim. When do I think I'm gonna race this model? Well, the next vintage race coming up is in early September. It's going to be in Winchester, Virginia. It's the Vintage Off-Road Nationals. And this is the first year that it's not up in New England. So it's a little bit closer to the people down in you know, the South or the Midwest. So that's the next race that's coming up. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be able to make it to it or not, but if I do, that's going to be the first time that I race this vehicle. I'm going to use some pliers to install this roll pin here in the axle. It's a little bit fiddly. Why isn't this going in? There we go. Roll pins also kind of suck. Ooh, I don't want to butcher this too much. There we go. That's one hub carrier assembled with the bronze bushings, which I don't like. Yes, that is correct. The price is $380 without electronics. for this kit. Which I can't really comment too much if it's a good deal or a bad deal. I know the original ones are definitely going up in value. And it is definitely worth it to some people to have a brand new kit that they can either race or build it up so it's perfect and they can just hold on to it. For other people, definitely not so much. And there is a reason why this is the first team associated re-release kit that I'm building, is because before I just simply couldn't afford them. You know, they aren't cheap. These roll pins suck. They're really kind of oversized for the hole here. So you can't even really kind of wedge it in and then use pliers. It's really hard to position these. Okay. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to take them back out in order to replace the bushings with bearings, but I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Ugh. Good Lord. Yeah, these are very tight roll pins. And amazingly, I haven't marred up these axles, so that probably looked pretty painful to watch, but believe it or not, they're not damaged. Yeah, typically you squeeze the one side of the pin to close it. That's a good idea. Yeah. That's a good tip. Jason said to squeeze the roll pin a little bit with some pliers to make it a little bit easier to get it started into the hole in the axle. Now it's time for ball studs. And this is the longer of the two styles of ball studs that come with the kit. We're getting there. We're making progress. I kind of envisioned that this would take about an hour and a half, 2 hours to assemble this kit, and I think that's probably pretty accurate. There's one. And there's two. And again, I'm using the aluminum lock nuts on the back of these ball studs as well. So now it's time to get the rear arms. Okay, and on the right side, the ball stud's facing forward. Get the shorter of the two hinge pin lengths. And again, I'm going to ignore the silver E-clips that come with the kit, and I'm going to use my own black E-clips because they look better. just like that. Let's see, I'm not sure which set of arm mounts it says to use in the manual. It doesn't really specify, but I'm going to use the 3-degree toe-in arm mounts. It also comes with 1.5 and I guess 0 degree. And these are marked left and right, which is nice. Okay, everything has been going together pretty smoothly. And there's not a lot of excess slop in any of the hinge pin holes. Okay, there's the right side there. Or the left side, rather. Now let's do the right side. They do make E-clip removal and installation tools, but I don't have one. I have my fingers, and they work well enough. But sometimes they can be a little bit tricky to install. Do I have access to a practice track? Yeah, my local track, I'm a member there, so I can practice there for free whenever they're open. It is about an hour away from my house though, so I don't get out there too often. I do wish it was a little bit closer. Okay, this says to use the forward holes, and again I'm using the large steel screws on the bottom, which a 2.5 millimeter driver fits very well into them. This kit does not have the aluminum Phillips head screws that we all know and love from other RC10 kits. It uses these black steel screws, which is fine. It's always good to have a little bit more weight down low at the bottom of the chassis. Especially on these old cars, which were really designed to use big, heavy NiCad battery packs, and now we have super lightweight lithium polymer packs that have twice the capacity and weigh even less. So typically these cars come out to be underweight anyways. And my local track is called World of RC in Lucama, North Carolina. They have a big outdoor track that they use for 1/8 scale vehicles, and they have an indoor dirt oval track as well as a indoor clay off-road track. And the clay that we have down here is really nice. It's like honestly, when it's watered well, it almost has the consistency of like modeling clay. And so on that type of a surface, we typically use J-Concept silver smoothies, so slick tires. And I know some people use Proline Bald Eagle tires in the S3 compound, which seems to work best. And also Raw Speed Slicks Gumball, the pink compound. Those work really well as well on our track surface. And every year we have a vintage race in January. We've been doing it for the past 2 years, and it's been going pretty well, I think. Typically the people who come down and travel seem to be generally pretty happy with the track conditions. Sometimes the jumps are a little bit big though for the vintage cars, and so you have to be a little bit careful because these cars can be fragile, and that's part of the appeal of doing the re-release cars is theoretically with the modern plastics they should be a little bit stronger. Now, one thing I'm noticing now that I attach this to the chassis is that there's a little bit of slop there between the arm and the inner pivot there. Not as much on the left side though, just a little bit on the right side. So it's probably just like a molding inconsistency. All right, moving on to the rear bulkhead. We need to attach the Camber link ball studs. Let's see. There's one and there's two. And the manual has it using this really inner hole there on the bulkhead, which is really just like what would be used on like the world car or like a team car. Typically you want to use that inner hole. And always it kind of interferes with the bottom of the wing tube mount, but since this doesn't have a wing, I'm just going to take my knife and whittle away a little bit at the bottom of the wing tube mount, just so that my driver can clear it enough to screw the ball stud all the way down. And that's going to make maintenance easier. It's going to make, if you need to remove it at any point, it's going to make it a lot easier to do. Just like that. Set that bottomed all the way down. Unfortunately, there's no room on the back there for a lock nut unless you cut away all of this material, which I'm not going to do. Even still, you can't do it because that's where it attaches to the side of the chassis, which really sucks because I have had these ball studs back out on me while I was racing, and they're very tricky to get to in order to screw them back in. Typically, you just need to remove the entire bulkhead. Okay. Let's see. Now it says to install the bulkhead. Just like that, with 2 more of these big screws. That. I don't want to over tighten it, of course. Let's see. And some 1/2-inch screws as well going into the sides. Okay. Next it has me making the rear camber links, but first I'm going to attach the rear shock tower. And before I do that, I need to install the rear body mount. So the rear body mount on these cars, there's two parts on each side actually. There's this little shelf piece. There's a little nub that is separate and it screws on right there. And I was never really sure why it's not just molded as one piece. I think maybe because they figure if they wanted to use different bodies on these body mounts, then they might need different length body posts. That's my theory, at least. Little 1/4 inch screws holding those on. Okay, and those are fitted to the shock tower with a 3/8 inch screw. That's nice because the shock tower has two different positions that you can mount it in for two different body heights, I guess. And now we need to attach it to the bulkhead with 4 5/16 inch screws. Let's see, there's 2. You know, thinking back, I would have probably liked to install the shock tower onto the bulkhead before mounting the bulkhead into the chassis. That would have made things a little bit easier instead of having to kind of do this inside the chassis. So if you're building one of these, I would recommend attaching the rear shock tower first. That'll make your life a little bit easier. Oops. Alright, there's the shock tower installed there. And also 2 3/4 inch. It has me putting the shock mount through this middle hole, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on the innermost hole. Just like that. And again, just like the front, there's these thicker nuts. Uh-oh, I hear fireworks starting up already. Where's my other nut driver? There it is. There's a couple good setup sheets for these cars. You can find at petiterc.com has some good setup sheets as well. Actually, Associated also put out some good setup sheets for this car. You'll want to maybe even look on the RC10 Talk forum as well, because I've seen some people posting up their Vonets setups on there, and that's probably what's most likely going to match a setup that'll work for you if you usually run it like an indoor clay track or something like that. Something where you would use like slick tires or maybe like a ghost pin or a ghost tread tire. Somewhere that is high bite. I suppose now I need to make the last two turnbuckles. I've been avoiding it, as you can tell. So these ones need to be 2.01 inches between the inside of the two ball cups. And ultimately, this is something that you're going to really want to tweak and fine tune. Once you have the vehicle all assembled, you'll use camber gauges to get the final length of these camber links. Let's measure that. 2.08, so I'm going to call that good enough for now. Actually, one of these ball cups needs to be rotated 180 degrees. Just like that. Okay, last one. All right, let's measure that. 2.03, even better. All right, that's all of our camber links there set up. Now it's time for the rear transmission, or the transmission, I guess. Nope, it has us doing shocks first. Let's see, clean up a little bit. And let's break out bag H, which is the shock absorbers. And this is the part that I'm most looking forward to, because it means I can test out the Moto-Obscura bleeder shock caps on these shock bodies to make sure they still fit. Okay. Let's start with the fronts. I'm gonna make some more room here. There's that nice gold anodized shock body. These are top-loading shocks. So they have the cartridge inside the bottom of the shock absorber, which means we need, does it come with a shock assembly tool? It does. And it comes with some Allen wrenches too, but I would hate to build this entire car using those little Allen wrenches. So this is the little shock assembly tool that you need. Okay, before we go any further, let's see if the shock caps fit. There's the Moto-Obscura bleeder shock cap. It has a hole in the top for the little button head screw, and that's where you bleed the shocks from. O-ring on the shock body there. And it threads on there. Very nice. You feel the resistance there as it engages the O-ring. Look at that. So there's confirmation. The Moto-Obscura bleeder shock caps do fit the RC10T Classic re-release shock bodies. Okay, how do we assemble these shocks? So for the front shocks, I'm going to use the number 2 pistons, and the rear shocks, I'm going to use the number 1 pistons. Number 1, number 1, number 2, number 2. I'm going to trim the flashing off the edge of the pistons. Where'd my 4th piston go? One, two, one. I'm missing a 2, so I'll take another one. Okay. Front shocks first. Need a couple E-clips for the shock shaft. Put a piston on there. And clip it in place. Now let's do that again. Like that. Okay. Now this is where things get interesting. You're gonna need your assembly tool. And where are the O-rings? Here they are. Got some O-rings and some nylon washers. internal spacers, as well as these little clips. And these clips are what are going to hold the shock cartridge together. How this works is you take your assembly tool, you take one of these clips, put it on the bottom there, and then in this order you need a plastic washer, you need a red silicone O-ring, which I'm going to lube with some silicone grease. Slide that on there, and then you need one of these thick spacers. That goes on, followed by another red O-ring, and finally another plastic washer. Just like that. Okay, I've got the stack up correct, and then you're going to take the tool, and I'm going to clean my hands off real quick. Yeah, the anodized gold looks pretty cool. Take the shock body and push the tool up through the bottom there. You can set it on a table and push down and wait for a click, just like that. And that's it. That's the shock cartridge installed in the bottom of the shock absorber. And then you can put whatever spacers you want to add to the shock. I'm going to put 2 of these spacers on the shaft there to limit the down travel just a little bit, and very gently slide the threads of the shaft through the O-rings. You don't want to clip the O-rings as you do that. Now it looks like there's 2 different lengths of the shock rod end. I'm going to go with the shorter one. It doesn't really specify in the manual, it doesn't look like. But I'm going to try the shorter ones. I'm going to try to get that started there. And I have a pair of needle nose pliers that I wrapped some tape around to protect the shock shaft. They do make specific aluminum shock shaft pliers, but I am too cheap to buy those. So some electrical tape around some needle nose pliers usually does the trick pretty well. Just like that. Now let's do the next one. So same process, clip, plastic washer, red O-ring, lubricated with silicone grease, thick spacer, another red O-ring, followed by a final plastic washer. And where'd my paper towel go? There it is. Now I'm going to set these up in my shock stand and fill them with 35 weight oil. I think the kit comes with 30 weight oil, but I'm going to go with 35 in the front and 30 in the back. And I typically use low-C shock oil just because I like that it's color-coded. And what I like to do after I fill it to the top with shock oil, I push it up a little bit. You'll see a little meniscus form at the top there, and then when you pull it down, all of the air that was trapped underneath the shock piston is going to rise to the top, and then you can top it off. Just like that. And while those let all of the air rise out of the oil, I'm going to get started on the rear shocks. Handy dandy tool. Perfect. I seem to be missing one of my little plastic washers. So I might have to dig into my my washer part or my shock absorber parts box to see if I can find another one. That'll work. Okay. And again, for the back, I'm going to use #1 pistons with 30 weight oil. And up front, I think I'm going to use silver springs. And in the back, I will probably use green springs to start off with. Oops. I think it reconnected now. Sorry about that, guys. What? Oh, it's back. Okay, now I'm gonna add the rear shock absorbers to the stand. First, I'm gonna put the shock cap O-rings on, because it's really difficult to put the O-rings on once you've already put oil in the shocks, so keep that in mind. I'm going to use TLR 30 weight in the rear shocks. And just like the front, I'm gonna push the piston up a little bit until I see that meniscus form at the top, and then slowly pull it down, and that's going to release all of the trapped air from underneath the piston. Just like that. Then I can top it up. So I'll set that right there to wait for all the air bubbles to work their way up and out. And in the meantime, I'll open up my other package of Moto-Obscura bleeder shock caps. Start to assemble those. So they come with the shock cap itself. It also comes with this little plastic sealing washer, as well as a real tiny button head screw. And so the button head screw requires a 0.05 inch driver. So you're going to want to put the screw on the driver like that, and then take the sealing washer and press it onto the screw. It's a tight fit, but it's supposed to be a tight fit. So you can thread that all the way to the base of the button head screw. And you're going to want to do that for all 4 of the bleeder screws. And the really nice thing about these bleeder shock caps is they do a really good job at letting you get almost all of the air out of the shock absorber, and you can make a really nice dead shock. And what that means is so fluid is not compressible, and so if you fill the inside of the shock absorber completely with shock oil, and there's no air or anything in there, you're not going to be able to compress the piston in there, because as the piston and the shock shaft go into the shock body, it's taking up volume. So if the fluid is incompressible, where does that volume come from? And the answer is you can't push it in. It'll either start to leak out somewhere, or it'll press, past the O-rings. So what you need to do, and I'll demonstrate in a second, is when you build the shock absorbers, you start up with completely full of oil, you put the bleeder shock caps on, and you take the bleeder screw out, and then you're gonna want to compress the shock almost all the way to the top, so that oil is gonna spill out, but also all of the air is going to be evacuated out of the shock absorber. And then once the shock shaft is almost all the way to the top, then you put the bleeder screw in. And what that's going to allow is for the shock absorber to have minimal air in there, but also it's not going to lock up when you try to push it up. So here is all 4 of the Obscura bleeder shock caps prepped and ready to go. So I'm going to start with the fronts. And I like to have a little glass bowl full of, this has simple green and shock oil and all sorts of other dirt and crud. So you're going to want to make sure that it's filled all the way to the top. You might even want a tiny bit of this meniscus, even with the shock all the way in the down position. You're going to take one of your bleeder shock caps and just start to thread it on, but don't go too far, because now you need to remove the bleeder screw. And close it all the rest of the way. And as you close the shock cap onto the shock body, you might already start to get some oil coming out of the bleeder hole. It's tight on there. Now I'm going to very slowly push the shock shaft up. You can see it's starting to drip out the side until I get to the top. Now I'm going to put my bleeder screw back in. And the hole for the bleeder screw is right in the center of the shock, so you want to keep the shock absorber vertical when you do this, so that all of the air, which is going to be at the very top, is going to escape out of the bleeder hole. Just like that, you've got a beautifully bled shock absorber. You take a paper towel and wipe off the excess oil. Now you just need to do this 3 more times. Whereas with the non-bleeder shock absorbers, you'd have to kind of hold the shock absorber at a 45-degree angle to try to get the air to bleed out the side. For that reason, I kind of like the old Losi bottom-loading shocks, because they had a little slot cut into the threads that made bleeding a little bit easier. Just gonna put a drip more oil in there. Now it's time for round 2. That's threaded on. I'm going to remove the bleeder screw. Okay, that's tight. Slowly push the shock shaft up, and it's going to start to drip out. And bleeder screw back in. Doesn't get any easier than that. And wipe off the excess. It's a nice dead shock absorber. And what I mean by dead is that when you press it, it's not gonna it doesn't try to spring back. Because like I said earlier, since the fluid is non-compressible, when you push it in and there's nowhere for that volume to go, it's gonna push back. So sometimes with the rear shock absorbers is the shaft is so long and it takes up so much volume that, first of all, quite a bit more oil is going to come out. But also you might find that once you put the bleeder screw back in, it's actually going to want to spring instead of, you know, pushing out. Once you pull it down, it might want to spring back in a little bit, yeah, just like that. And that's okay. That's not a problem. Make sure that's tight. No air leaks. Now it's time for the last one. Okay, that's got enough oil. Just like that. And that's how you bleed associated shock absorbers with the Moto-Obscura bleeder shock cap. So now we need to put these little the shock eye balls into the rod ends. And sometimes these are real difficult to do, so other times you can just do it with your hand like that. Yeah, that was pretty easy. Not bad. Ooh, that one's trickier. And sometimes if it's real tough to push on one direction, if you flip it over, it's a little bit easier. Just like that. Let's see, where are we? Shock caps, spring collars are in this bag. And the spring collars use a 440 by 3/8 screw. Those thread in just like this. Just like that. I kind of need to visualize where on the car they are so I can decide what direction they need to face. This is a rear, this is a front. And that's a little bit sort of up to personal preference, what direction you want the spring collar screws to be on. For instance, I'm kind of going against what it says to do in the manual, but it's just how I prefer to do it. Okay. Now I'm going to put the green springs on the back. For that, I need the lower spring perches. Like that. Very nice. Now I need this little top bushing for each of the upper shock mounts. And then they say to put an aluminum washer for the front springs. I think I'm just going to use the golds that came with the car, wherever they may be, right here. Although I think they may be a little bit too stiff, but I guess we'll see. I'll probably do some tuning on the track. I kind of wanted silvers, but I looked in my box and I didn't see any, so I might have to track some down. Blues might actually be another good option for the front. I like to have the bleeder screws kind of facing inwards. I don't really know why. I guess if you flip the car over, dirt won't get them in there as easily. But to be honest, it's just an aesthetic thing. These aluminum washers are a little bit too big to fit the shock caps, which is interesting. I might just go with a lock washer without the aluminum washer. Yeah, these aluminum washers are a little bit oversized. I'll go ahead and use it anyways. Yeah, because you can kind of lift it up. The hole for the washer is a little bit oversized too for a 440. It's a little bit bigger than it needs to be, so you can kind of wiggle it on there, and it'll fit on top of the step on the shock cap. So let's tighten this up a little bit. You don't want it too snug, because it needs to be able to pivot and kind of wiggle around a little bit. Yeah, kind of like that. Okay, I lost an aluminum washer. Oops. Oh. Lost a washer. Yeah, I like how these gold aluminum washers or lock nuts are looking, especially with the gold shock bodies. Again, you don't want it to be too tight, just on there enough so that it's not going to come off. Okay. And a 440 by 5/8 screw for the lower. And that's going to go on the inner arm mount. Okay. Nice. That's looking pretty good. And at the back, I'm going to go with the middle hole on the arm, and we need a 5/8 inch screw. Really a 5/8 screw? That seems a little bit short for the rear shock. How long is this? That's a 3/4 inch screw. And honestly, that seems a little bit more appropriate for this lower shock bolt. So I think maybe that's a typo. Because look at this is a 3/4 inch screw. By the time it passes through the lower shock eyelet, it leaves probably about a 1/2 inch of material there, which is about how deep the holes on the rear arm are. So I'm going to go with this 3/4 inch screw. I don't know where they came from, so they were in the kit for some reason. So I'm gonna assume that that's really what they should be. And actually, I'm going to put a washer on the outside, underneath the head of the screw as well, just because I have had the little shock ball in the eyelet pull itself out. And so a washer there really stops that from happening. Second 3/4 inch screw, and this is kind of what I mean. I'm going to put an aluminum washer right on the screw, just like that. And then through the lower shock eyelet into the middle hole on the rear arm. That's not something that they show doing in the manual, but it's just some added security. And I see some extra washers here for some reason, so I'm going to use them. Excellent. We're almost there. There's the suspension done. That's looking pretty good, other than the uneven shock collars. Okay, I should be worrying about that right now. All right, I think we're moving on to the transmission now. We have to build a diff, so I'm going to set this aside, clear off my work surface a little bit of all these extra parts, and pull out bag K. How are we doing on time? Holy crap, we gotta finish this. Okay, so immediately one thing I noticed is that this has the old style transmission cases, in that the idler bearing, idler gear bearings are set into the transmission case rather than set into the idler gear. The World's Car re-release, and well, I guess that's the only re-release that had a stealth transmission. It used the sort of B4 style setup with the bearing in the idler gear. Another thing that's interesting to note is that it has these separate little stud extenders that kind of slot into the case, whereas on the World's Car re-release, again, it was just molded into the case. It didn't have those separate pieces. So this uses a original style top shaft that has the roll pin rather than the B4 style, which just uses the slots on the sides, which also means, and I have I have somewhere a Moto-Obscura Delrin slipper pad, but I can't find it. Anyway, this should be the same size slipper pad as what's found on the B2, the original World's Car, Team Car, anything that used that original, one disc slipper, whereas the B2 used the double pad material setup. And that's good because I think these slipper pads were kind of getting rare for a little while. I made some in Delrin, and I've been selling those. But it's interesting to note that they went back to that style. And it also comes with a little felt gasket that goes between the transmission and the motor plate. That's cool. I don't think we've seen that before, and I just broke it. Okay, great. So, anyways, let's build this diff. Ooh, that's an aluminum top shaft. Okay, focus. diff. All right, so we start out with the center gear here, and we've got, I think, 12 of these carbide diff balls. So without losing any of the balls, I'm going to dump them out. And we should be able to kind of set them into one side of the gear without them falling all the way through. Yep. Just like that. Oops. Do not lose any of the carbide diff balls. I know you think you can get away with 11, but it's really a lot better if you have all 12. Or however many this has. I didn't actually count them. Okay. Now I'm going to take my... Do I want to use silicone grease? Yes, I do want to use silicone grease. Silicone grease for the diff balls. Just like that. Because silicone grease has a low enough lubricity that it will not stop the balls from, you know, gripping onto the drive rings. That's the right word. Because you don't want the diff balls sliding on the drive rings, because it will actually cut grooves into them. So I'm going to need bushings for the center of the diff. 5/32 by 5/16. I believe that's these. Push that into the center of the diff. Very nice. And I need out drives. This one specifically. Put that there. I'm going to go ahead and oil this, I think. I'm going to oil the bronze bushing where it goes on the out drive there. I'll do this one as well. Just like that. And you need a diff ring. Now I've seen people do something like putting some silicone on the out drive. In fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. And then you slide the diff ring over top of that. And that'll just kind of stick it in place so that we can take our gear, put it over that. And we need to do the same with our second out drive. I'm going to put some grease on there so that we can stick our drive ring to it. And that's going to stop it from falling when I turn it upside down and put it on there. Just like that. Now, we need to assemble the adjustment screw and the thrust bearing. So here's the T-nut, here's the screw, and here are the races for the thrust bearing. And I'm gonna actually use some of this black grease. This is Losi high pressure black grease, and it is a better lubricant. And that's kind of what you want for the thrust bearing, rather than a silicone grease. Don't want to put too much though, so it doesn't get everywhere. Just a little bit more of that grease. And there is the assembled thrust bearing on the adjustment screw. And let's see, which side does that go through? Or does it matter? I'm gonna put it down through this. Just like that. I'm gonna need my 5/64 driver. There's the T-nut. There it is. Ooh, spring. Spring goes in before the T-nut. And you'd think I would know how to build these. And you can tighten it down a little bit. Actually, I'm going to tighten it down a lot a bit. And with it somewhat tight, you should be able to feel it, and it should rotate all the way through pretty smoothly. It does. There's some tight spots there, but it feels okay. And that'll loosen up a little bit as it breaks in. Okay, now on the head of the screw side, there's this little T-cover thing that goes down on it. And it has a hole in the side so you can still stick your driver in to adjust the diff. And now there are 2 dog bone spacers. What do those look like? 2 dog bone spacers. I'm not sure. I don't see them. Oh, they're right here. These 2 little plastic rings, I guess, are dog bone spacers. And those go inside the outdrive. And I guess that's what that's going to do is, since there's a spring in the hub carrier, or there will be, it's pushing the dog bone into the outdrive of the diff. And you don't want it really rubbing on the T-nut or on that other cover plate. It has these specific plastic rings for the dog bone to ride on. Okay. Nice. Okay, now we need to assemble the transmission. I'm going to trim some flashing off of the cases. Top shaft, which I can resume my excitement for now because it is aluminum. It's aluminum top shaft. Look at that. That's pretty cool. I'm going to take my bearings. Oops. Actually, I'm going to use shielded bearings, not sealed. Bearing there, and a bearing here. And that is going to go through that way, just like that. I'm going to put, so here's the idler bearing, and like I said, it has the shaft going through the bearing and through the gear, I should say, and the bearing is actually pressed into the transmission case halves, unlike on the World's car. Put the bearings in the case halves, just like that, and the gear sits right in there. Very nice. Now I have 2 bearings for the diff. Push those into the case halves like so, with the shield facing out, and it's just bare balls on the inside. That makes maintenance very easy, but if you put them backwards, it just means you're going to get a bunch of crud in your bearings. So here is the diff. I like to have the adjustment on the right-hand side. That's the other way. Just like that. Put it all together. And there you go. There is a stealth transmission. These things are very easy to assemble, way, way, way better than the 6-gear transmissions were. Now I need to take these little plastic spacers, and they go on the side that the output or the input shaft is, because they space the transmission cases away from the motor plate. So those go there. Where is the motor plate? Right here. Motor plate is gonna go right about there. Do I want to mess with the? I'm gonna put the felt or the felt gasket on, anyways. Even though I tore it almost immediately, tore out the edges there. Actually, you can go on eBay and they make little foam gaskets that go on here, and they work really well too. But for now, I'm just gonna use the felt gasket. That fits on just like that. Now I should have 4 1-inch motor plate screws. And here they are. You could substitute with these with 1-inch aluminum socket head cap screws. If you want to save a little bit of weight, because these aren't highly stressed screws. Oh, rookie mistake. Before I put the motor plate on, I need to put the roll pin in the top shaft. Carefully take the foam or the felt gasket off, and I'll try Jason's trick. I'm gonna squish the end of the roll pin a little bit so that it's easier to slide into the top shaft. Just like that. And I'm going to be very, very careful because it's an aluminum top shaft. But I'm going to squeeze it all the way through with my pliers without screwing up the top shaft. And it's still a pain in the ass. But we get there. You want to be very careful because, of course, you don't want to bend the top shaft. That is the drawback to it being aluminum. Or the potential drawback, I should say. Yes, the top shaft is aluminum. And it's the style that has the roll pin going through it. I've never seen an aluminum top shaft that has the roll pin. I've always seen the B4 style aluminum top shafts. Okay. With the transmission assembled, it still rotates nice and smooth. That's awesome. Let's see. We're getting to the end of the book. There's a bunch of steps that I already did. Now it's time to assemble the slipper. So the slipper slides over the top shaft there. And there should be a bushing that fits into this one. That bushing there. I'm going to put some grease on the slipper bushing. But not a whole lot because you don't want any of this grease getting onto the slipper pad. Just like that. Take your slipper pad and put it on there and make sure it stays lined up as you slide it on to the top shaft. Now we need to assemble the thrust bearing for the slipper, which consists of 2 steel washers. You're going to put 1 steel washer on there. There's a bronze thrust bushing that fits between the steel washers, like that. And actually, I'm going to put some grease on this as well. Where did my grease go? Right here. Put some grease on there and wipe off the excess. And slipper spring. And there's a lock nut, which if it's like the old ones, it's not a 440 nut, it's a 540 nut. So you could, I'll save you a lot of frustration by letting you know that it is a 540 lock nut for the slipper adjustment. You can try to put a 440 lock nut on the top shaft, but it will not work. You will sit there struggling for a long time. There's a little bit of side play in the top shaft, so I'll probably take it back apart eventually and shim it a little bit, but not a huge deal. So there's the assembled transmission and slipper. So now we need to put it in the chassis. Fits right there, and we need 4 3/8 inch flathead screws. That's right here. And the trick to this, I think, is you're going to want to put the screws in, but not tighten it all the way until you kind of are able to tighten everything else up, and it'll kind of all cinch into place. If you tighten up one thing without the other components installed, things might be a little bit misaligned and they won't pull together when you tighten it down. But if you leave everything a little bit loose, at least at first, everything will kind of adjust together. Man, so 3 hours in and we're almost done with this build. It's funny because when you look at this car, you think there's not a whole lot to it. You think you could knock out this build in, what, 20 minutes? Oh, dog bones, that's right. That's okay. I'm going to tighten down the transmission and then I'll pop off the camber links. Good catch, Jason, but I'll just pop off the camber links. Okay, dog bones. There's a spring that goes into there, the rear hub. And your dog bone goes in here. And it goes into the outdrive, just like that. And pop the camber link back on. That's one dog bone. That's a one-wheel drive truck. Spring in the axle. Dog bone. And into the outdrive. You know, it'll be interesting to see what kind of... I know Team Associated was kind of teasing that they're gonna have some part support. That's kind of funny to say that they're gonna have. Oh, they're gonna have part support for their own car. That's great, but realistically, they kind of haven't when it comes to the vintage stuff or the re-release stuff. So it'll be nice that they're actually going to support the products and support the racers. It'll be kind of interesting to see what hop-up parts they come out with. So maybe they might come out with some CVDs or something. Only time will tell, though. Okay, so now we need to install 2 1/4-inch button head screws in the back. And so this is kind of what I was talking about. When you tighten the transmission down, and there's a huge gap between the rear kick-up motor guard and the motor plate. So I'm actually going to loosen the screws on the bottom of the transmission a little bit so that we can cinch everything together. And as I'm building this, I'm looking at the bottom of the car and I'm seeing my sweaty fingerprints all over the chassis. It's disgusting, but it is probably about 90 degrees out here, so. So I'm going to attach the rear kick-up to the motor plate. And on my team car, I've put washers between them before to kind of take up some of that slack. It doesn't show anything like that on the instruction manual, so I'm just going to build it as is. Jason, I'm not sure if there's anything that you prefer to do when it comes to the gap between the kick-up and the motor plate. Like I was saying, on my team car, I think I'd just have like a single aluminum washer between there. But actually, this is going together pretty well, so. And before I tighten the bottom, kind of put the transmission brace on the top. And since this is not a buggy, I don't think we need to, there's obviously no body mount that goes on there. So we need 2 1/2-inch socket head screws and 2 5/16-inch socket head screws. Where would those be? 1/2-inch, 5/16-inch, and 4 aluminum washers. Uh-oh, maybe this is where my extra aluminum washer came from. 1, 2, 3, shit. That was a long time ago, though. Maybe I could steal it from somewhere else. I don't know what these are. I'm going to steal a washer from here. I think this is the servo mounting equipment, but I'm not going to use these aluminum washers for that anyways. Okay, I have 4 aluminum washers again, and I have 4 appropriately sized screws. Where's my screwdriver? There it is. So the shorter screws go in the back into the transmission case. Do not over tighten these though, because the transmission case is very easy to strip. historically. I'm not sure how the new plastics react, but I think all of my stealth transmissions, these holes on the top where the brace threads into are pretty wallowed out. That's a good point, Jason. Jason just commented that if you pull on the motor guard too much, you start to reduce the anti-squat in the rear suspension. So typically you want to kind of take up that gap a little bit if there is a bunch of a gap there. In this case, it doesn't look like there was. So, but like I was saying earlier on my team car, there is a much bigger gap, and I put some aluminum washers in between the motor plate and the kick-up to kind of take up that gap. But on this build, it's looking pretty good. And once I have the transmission brace on, I'll snug up the countersunk screws on the bottom. There's that. Tighten these up. Very good. Are we done? Shows mounting the electronics and the motor, which I'm not going to do at this point. I guess I'll put the gear cover on. Does it come with a spur gear? It does. It comes with this old school looking spur gear. What is it? A 87 tooth. That is huge. For 17.5 stock racing, I'll probably put like a 78 spur gear on here. Luckily, since it's not the B4 style top shaft and slipper, you don't need B4 spurs. You can use, you know, universal Kimbro spur gears or anything like that, because it just uses 2 screws to mount the spur gear. For now, though, I guess I'll put the 87 on, unless I have something different. Let's see what I got. There's an 81. I'll put the 81 on. That's an original. This is the new one. Looks pretty similar. Actually, it looks really similar. Okay. Two little 1/4-inch screws hold the spur gear to the slipper. And you don't need to take the slipper apart to swap spur gears, which is super nice with the old single pad slipper design. There's that. Gear cover. Fits very well over the motor plate. It shows as not using any washer. I think I might use a washer over the Lexan, but for now I'm just going to use the screws. That looks very nice. And the slipper adjustment plug. The hole is pre-cut, so hopefully it's the right size. Very nice. That's a very nice compliant rubber too. It's not stiff or anything. That's starting to look like an RC10T, huh? So now they have installing the battery, which we're not going to do. Ooh, do I want to tackle wheels? I'm not going to use these wheels, but I guess I should build them. Simply because there is so much hype about the skinny front wheels. So let's see what it looks like. Look at those tires. Proper pin tires. Team Associated. Some ribs. Team Associated. These are very stiff rubber too, but these would be perfect in loose dirt. You know, the kind of dirt that we never race on anymore. So we got 2 skinny spacers, 2 thick spacers. These 3-piece wheels can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but there's no foam inside them. You just get this spacer put in. Ooh. Just like that. I'm only going to well, maybe I should assemble them all. I was going to say I'm only going to assemble one front and one rear, but we got to do it properly. There's one. It's kind of hard sometimes to get the tire to not be lopsided also when you assemble these wheels. But you just kind of need to make sure that the sidewall is uniform all the way around. Just like that. Make sure the 4 holes line up, obviously. And what kind of screws do we need? 440 by 5/8. In this baggie. And that's these long screws, I think. By, oh, for the front wheel you need 1/2 inch, not 5/8. Hardwood floors. It's hard to imagine that those pin tires would work on hardwood floors. Would you sand the pins down, I'm assuming? Jason's saying that he used to use these, these pin tires are the same as the Proline Pro 50 tires, and that they used to use them for racing on hardwood floors. So I just saw a few people joined. We're back up to 9 people watching right now. So if you're just tuning in now, we basically finished the chassis build. And now I'm assembling the wheels. These are 3-piece wheels, front and rear. And obviously we've got these skinny fronts that have been very hyped. And it came with these very aggressive pin tires for the rear. So there's one front. I just do I have bearings for these, so I'm gonna use the bearings. I'm just gonna have to put bearings in the rear hubs because I didn't have the proper size for those. Let's do a rear. Need to put the spacer in first. Yeah, so far this stream has been well over 3 hours. I kind of wanted this to be sort of a tips and tricks to keep in mind when you build your RC10T. But I think this is kind of too long format for that. Maybe if you put it on 2 times speed, it would be a little bit more reasonable. Oh, nice. Jason is saying that they used to use a same type of tire as this for racing on hardwood floors, and they would cut out the center bars and keep the pins as is. That's pretty remarkable what people used to do back in the day to, especially with tire stuff. You know, tires are so advanced now with all the different compounds and tread patterns that we have and so specialized for every single type of surface. So it's incredible that back in the day when you didn't necessarily have that same selection, the things that people would do to make their tires work for them. What's going on here? I'm having some trouble threading this screw through, but I think it's because the halves aren't perfectly aligned. There we go. So for the rear, you need the longer screws. These are the 5/8 inch screws, whereas the front wheels use the 1/2 inch am I saying wheels? Screws. 1/2 inch screws for the front. It's been a long day. It's been a long video. I'm surprised I'm still here, let alone you guys. I think I just stripped out this screw. And that really didn't give a whole lot of warning either. Okay, so be careful when you're assembling these wheels because this plastic is, I don't know if the holes are a little bit oversized, but I think it's very easy to strip out the 3-piece wheels. They'll stay together, but just keep that in mind. Yeah. There's a rear. Let's do another front. Yeah, time for 3mm screws already. That's a trick for vintage racing is 440 screws, which is what 90% of the screws in all of these vintage cars are, or at least the American-made vintage cars. They're 440 screws, and 3mm is very, very slightly larger than 440. So if you strip out a hole for a 440 screw, chances are you could thread a 3mm screw in there and it'll be just fine. I've done that a couple times for B2 transmission case, how the top brace that threads into the B2 transmission. Those, I've stripped out a bunch of them, and 3mm screws work really well in that application. Gonna over tighten these ones. There is the second front tire. All right, hold on guys, we're on the home stretch here. Just need to finish this last rear tire. right. That's pretty good without stripping this wheel out. That is all the wheels assembled. I'll put these two bearings in the front. All right, I think we can put them on the car now. So we need two 540 lock nuts for the front wheels and two 832 lock nuts for the rear wheels. Let's get the car back up here. Let's start with the rear wheels. Just like that. It's a pin drive rear wheel, obviously, no hexes here. You can get the, well actually these are a step, yeah, it's a 1/4 inch axle. So if you use the J-Concepts Mono RC10T wheels, you're gonna have to sort of, I'm looking for my battery. You're gonna have to kind of cut away, or you know, counterbore into the middle of the axle hole on the wheel, because it's got this little step there on the axle, which isn't too hard to do. You could even do it with like an X-Acto knife if you wanted to. Just that, very nice. Good axle length that engages the nylock insert on the nut very well. Very nice. Alright, I'm looking at a very complete looking RC10T. What does the book have to say? Book says we're done. I'm not going to paint the body tonight, obviously. But that's all that is left, is to paint and trim the body. There it is. It doesn't come pre-trimmed. You're going to have to cut the wheel arches and everything out. I'm not sure if it comes with a wing either. I don't think I saw a wing anywhere. So if you want a wing, you're going to have to kind of make one yourself. There might be enough scrap Lexan on here to make your own wing. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it. That looks like a complete RC10T to me. The camber and the toe is a little bit wonky because I didn't get the length of the turnbuckles exactly right. But overall, I'm very happy with the build. I like the quality of the parts. I think the color of the plastic, it's grown on me. I think it looks very good. I think well, obviously I need to replace the bushings in the hubs with bearings. I think those are the only bushings that I used. And I'd like to replace the stock 10T turnbuckles with maybe a Custom Works turnbuckle, the shorter ones. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I know it's been a long haul, well over 3 hours. But hopefully you'll get some nice tidbits and some tips and tricks out of this video. So thanks for watching. Oh shit, I need to walk over here to end the stream. Bye.